If this is your first time tuning into one of our Facebook Lives, my name is Dr. Rebecca Warren. I'm from drswarren.com. I am a mother of two, and most importantly, I have charted my cycles. Let's see how many years now. 6 years now. So I have been able to chart my cycles to successfully get pregnant when we were ready to get pregnant, and I have been able to successfully chart my cycles to avoid getting pregnant when we don't want to get pregnant, like right now. So guys, the reason why I wanted to do this is because I coach a lot of women. I coach a lot of women within my office, and I do a lot of health coaching online. And there's this common theme of women not fully understanding how important their cycles are to their health. It's not just about getting pregnant. Although, we spend so much of our time trying to avoid getting pregnant, but it's absolutely devastating when we try so long to not get pregnant, and then when we want to get pregnant, that we can't. Fertility rates are just decreasing year after year, and a lot of women are looking to be able to accomplish things within their life before getting pregnant. And so there's many reasons why, women might be offered birth control. There's a lot of reasons why women would get on birth control. Obviously, there is the option of not getting pregnant. I had a young woman in my office that just her health was just really stalled, and a lot of the symptoms that she was having was from her birth control, but she was so afraid to come off of it because it is life-changing to get pregnant. Do not get me wrong. So, but it was no matter how much, I tried to tell her that she didn't have to get pregnant just because she's off birth control. The fear that if she wasn't on it, she was going to get pregnant is real. That's a major problem. A lot of women get on birth control. Actually, I would say a majority of the women that see me are on birth control because of a symptom during their menstrual cycle, which is not okay. That's just covering up a symptom. And so pretty much how birth control works is you take something that really stops the brain's communication with your ovaries. And so think about it this, you can only get pregnant 6 days out of your cycle, only 6. And we decide to get rid of our cycle for 30 days. Also, there's a problem. There's an underlying problem for why you're in pain or why you're having heavy bleeding, why you're having irregular cycles. And what it comes down to is understanding what's causing that. But once you take that birth control, this is what I see happen. Because I coach young women, and then I coach, women in their 20s and 30s. And then I coach women that have gone through menopause. And so this is what happens. At a very young age, we're not taught about our bodies. Let's be honest, sex ed is scaring the crap out of you to not get pregnant and understand, trying to teach you body anatomy. And that's about it. But no one's really teaching women about what their cycles are saying. No one's teaching women how to understand and track their cycle. Because just so you know, there are 3 things that if you track these 3 things, these 3 things need to change in order for you to get pregnant. If you do not have these 3 signs, you're not going to get pregnant. So at a young age, we're not equipping young girls to understand their bodies. In fact, a lot of young girls kind of grossed out by their bodies. And this is how you know that. Women have cervical fluid. Cervical fluid is the equivalent of semen to men. It's a fertile fluid, and yet we call it cervical discharge as if there's something wrong with it, as if there's some kind of infection. And so, I'm not okay with it. And so at a young age, we're told that our female hormones is just to get pregnant, and just, we don't think about it. We don't share with our daughters how to track their cycles. And so 2 things happen. Either young women, decide to get on birth control because they want to, protect themselves against getting pregnant, or they start having pain with their cycles or heavy bleeding with their cycles, so they get on birth control. Then you stay on birth control, and then a few things happen. After you've been on birth control for a really long time, there's some women that decide they want to have kids. So there's one group of women that they can come off of it, and they're having difficulties getting pregnant. And then there's other women that come off of it and they can get pregnant right away. But they're not all left off easy because There's things that are going to happen during pregnancy and postpartum that are going to be off because we spent years stopping our hormones from doing what they need to do. So either way, we pay for taking, birth control because it is synthetic hormones. If you bleed on birth control, it's not a real menstrual cycle. Then we have women that are struggling during postpartum. They don't understand that progesterone is a neuroendocrine hormone, that it affects anxiety and depression in your body. And so when we don't address that, then we have postpartum depression, we have postpartum anxiety. And of course, postpartum depression and anxiety is not only just hormone related, but support related and experience related from their birth. Then a lot of women go back on birth control. Then if they don't go on birth control and they're having symptoms, they're either told they can go into early menopause to address the symptoms and the pain they're having, or they can have a hysterectomy. Let's just go ahead and cut out these vital organs that do more than just have babies. Your ovaries and your uterus do more than just have babies. And then comes perimenopause and menopause, where, we joke about what menopause is, and it's hot flashes, and it's headaches, and it's depression, it's anxiety, it's feeling lost, and we don't ever make the connection. It's because of this lifetime of ignoring female hormones that we've gotten to this place. So my goal today is to teach charting. So if you guys haven't followed me before, I have shared some of my awesome favorite resources that I used for tracking my fertility. The first thing I'm going to tell you guys, if you haven't already, you need to get this book. I know it's probably backwards here, but Taking Charge for Fertility is a powerful book. It is thick. I understand that, but it's a very easy read. You can jump around. You don't have to read. You don't have to read the book straight through. So this is the first time I was made aware of tracking my cycle. And let me go ahead and say this, that tracking your cycle is not the rhythm method, okay? So when I first started tracking my cycle, I remember someone was like, oh yeah, I know what that's called. That's called having a baby. And let me go ahead and tell you how much that annoys the crap out of me. And you're gonna understand why doing a fertility awareness method is very different than a rhythm method. You cannot just track on your app when you're bleeding and when you start bleeding again. That's not going to be accurate. Within medicine, it's kind of assumed that all women ovulate on day 14. That is not true. A woman, you can ovulate at different times depending on your cycle. You can ovulate at different times depending on your stress levels, if you're moving, how is work going. You can ovulate at different times if your body is sick. There's so many things that can happen. Alcohol, there's things that can influence your body's ability to ovulate. So just tracking when you're bleeding is not accurate. This is not, what I'm about to talk about tonight, this is not just hoping for the best. This is actively knowing that you can get pregnant and actively knowing if you want to get pregnant, when you should try. And the really cool thing is someone did send me their cycles ahead of time. I asked some questions, and I have a young woman that sent me her cycle. And so we'll talk about her cycle here in a little bit. We're going to go over what's going on her cycle so that you guys can understand. But let's go ahead and understand. Get ready for this. This is going to be really important. So women, share this right now. Share it with your friends. Tell your sisters. Tell your mom. Tell whoever needs to be on, because we're about to talk about what you need to know about your hormones, okay? So that's what we're about to go into right now. Make sure we don't have any questions so far. Hey, Irma, thank you for tuning in. All right. This is what you need to understand about your menstrual cycle. The first half of your menstrual cycle is considered the follicular phase. And this is, hey, Meshra, good to see you. So this is what you need to understand. The first part of your cycle is considered the follicular stage. From day 1 of bleeding to day 14-ish, it doesn't mean it has to be 14, but till 14-ish, the whole purpose is of estrogen rising and preparing your uterine wall for an egg to come out and implant and possibly create a baby. So day 1 through 14-ish is your follicular stage, meaning your FSH, your follicular stimulating hormone, is higher in this stage. So estrogen is going to be higher. This is why it's also really important that if you're experiencing health symptoms, to track your cycle, because a lot of the symptoms that women experience and young girls experience, we write it off as PMS. We say, oh, it's just, cramping, it's PMS, take some Midol. Or, you're moody, you must be on your period. When a lot of times these severe symptoms are telling us that there's a hormone imbalance. That's another reason why you should track your cycle, so you can know what your symptoms are saying and what hormones are possibly influencing that. So after you kind of get to that point where you're about to ovulate, luteinizing hormone spikes, okay? So FSH and estrogen, then day 14, day 15, day 16, wherever it may be, you're going to get a spike of luteinizing hormone, and then an egg is produced and released. After an egg is released from the corpus luteum, you will produce progesterone. And this is the only way you can get progesterone. And no, not birth control methods that give you progestin is going to be the same. Progesterone is awesome. So let's explain estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen is that woman hormone. It is what makes you feel like a woman, gives you your curves, it makes your lips feel full. But also estrogen is, adequate levels of estrogen is so vitally important for heart health and heart wellness, which the number one killer for women is heart attack. Also for brain health, for osteoporosis, which is a big deal because as you age, one of the biggest complications that leads to death is falls and fractures. So estrogen is so vitally important to have adequate levels. Too much estrogen can cause heavy bleeding, cramping bleeding, long bleeding days, a lot of pain. Having too much estrogen or not being able to clear estrogen from the body. Now, progesterone offsets estrogen. Progesterone is, again, like I said, a neuroendocrine hormone. It is associated with GABA receptors in the brain, which means this is what makes you feel good. When your progesterone is off along with high estrogen, you can feel anxious and weepy and overwhelmed. You can feel depressed even if you have a million things to be thankful for. You're just, your mood is so much, there's so much influence on your mood and your mental wellness when it comes to progesterone. So remember that. The first part of your cycle is that follicular stage. That's when the estrogen, FSH. The second part is that, there's ovulation, and then there's a post-ovulation stage of progesterone. So let's go ahead and get down to the 3 important signs that you're going to be charting and what they mean and what to look for. Okay, the first thing is basal body temperature. So this is one thing you have to understand if you're going to track your basal body temperature is this. There's only one day that your egg is being released. Only one day. But sperm can survive up to 5 days. So knowing, when you are ovulating is going to be really, really important. And then you can plan around that date to, if you're not doing any birth control, you can choose to do a barrier method and not do any barrier methods the rest of the time of that month because you cannot get pregnant. And I'm gonna explain the second sign that's gonna be really important for this. But so the first sign is that basal body temperature. And of course, if you guys have any questions at all, make sure you comment here on this video. Make sure that if you would like a consult to go into any hormone issues, if you've been cycling and you'd like to know how to understand your cycles better, you can just message us here, message me on Dr. Warren, our Facebook page. So let's go back to this. So the basal body temperature. So what you've got to understand is that when you are charting, and let me go ahead and show you guys some examples of charts. That's why I brought down this book so you could see it. Because I have people that use apps. You don't just want to use any app. And so some apps like the Glow app or the Clue app will chart things for you. But this is a really great example of what a chart looks like. So you see, those are all temperature readings. So a few things to understand about taking your basal body temperature is that you have to take it when you're laying in bed. You have to lay there It's not cuddling time, it's not hanging out time. Like as soon as you wake up, you need to put the thermometer under your tongue and or in your mouth, and then take that temperature. Then you're gonna chart it. So this is what you've got to understand. When you ovulate, there will always be a spike in your temperature. So when you ovulate, there will always be a spike. But you've got to understand that when you see the spike, you have already ovulated. So the whole point of charting like this is to see a pattern. And so one question I get is people, like, when they chart it, they're like, oh, this is like so wonky. And you're not looking at the individual points in your charting, you're looking at the pattern. You're going to see a bunch of temperature that's going to be on the lower end, and that's because it's suppressed by estrogen. And then when luteinizing hormone is released, the egg is released, progesterone is being made, you're going to have a spike in your temperature, which would make sense. It's actually kind of cool to think about that your body thinks it's going to grow a human, so it's kind of like a little incubator. It's going to start getting warmer. Your body's going to be warmer. That's how I knew that when we decided to try to get pregnant, I knew I was pregnant even before I got a positive pregnancy test. Your basal body temperature, it's going to spike every time you ovulate. What happens if you don't see a spike? Then you have not ovulated. And that's really important to understand. You're checking that basal body temperature to make sure you're ovulating. Now, something to understand about the first half of your cycle and the second half of your cycle is this. The first half of your cycle can vary. If you're under stress, you don't have to ovulate on day 14. You can ovulate on day 21. If life is crazy, that can happen. Sometimes when we're around other women, our menstrual cycles can resync with theirs. So the first part, that follicular stage, can vary. It can be shorter, it can be longer. There's different things that can influence that. After you ovulate, after you see that temperature spike, that stays the same. It's between 12 to 15 days is what usually happens after ovulation. If you're tracking and you see a spike and it stays high, so what happens is you can see that right here again. You can see these lower levels. Make sure I'm pointing to the right thing. You can see these lower levels, and then when your egg is released, it's going to go up higher, and then it's going to stay higher until it comes back down right before you have your period again. So that progesterone staying high means that those temperatures staying high means that you're producing sufficient amount of progesterone, and the temperature is staying high. But what happens if you see those numbers stay high for over 18 temperatures? That means you're pregnant. So if that stays high and it never comes down, then you achieved pregnancy. But again, it's not very hard. All you have to do is take your temperature before rising. I want you to understand that with these 3 signs, if you do not have these signs, you cannot get pregnant, okay? So I've had people that just freak out, like, I don't know. Listen, a lot of women are scared about getting pregnant, and their fear is like this. It's like saying, I have an empty beer bottle in my hand. I'm scared I'm gonna get drunk. It's just not gonna happen. There needs to be beer in the bottle. You also need to put the bottle to your mouth, and you also need to drink 6 of them. So that's the same thing I want you to understand. Your basal body temperature is what's going to make it accurate in regards to, are you ovulating and are you producing enough progesterone to keep that second phase sustained? You need that second phase to be at least 10 days. If you're not having 10 days, or if the temperature is not on the higher end, then you have a progesterone problem. So that's the first thing to keep an eye on, is your basal body temperature. The second thing to keep an eye on is your cervical fluid. This is the one that sometimes I get people just kind of be like, oh, like they kind of feel really grossed out about, or they just like, oh, cervical fluid. First of all, it's not cervical discharge. Discharge is if you have an infection, and there's different signs and symptoms for infections that you should see your doctor about. But you know as a woman what cervical fluid means. Oftentimes you can feel cervical fluid on your underwear or when you're wiping. You can also just grab it and test it yourself. So cervical fluid, like I said at the beginning of this video, it's the equivalent of semen. It is a fertile fluid. And so without that fertile fluid there, you just can't get pregnant. And so this is what I'll say. One of the questions I had here was, if I'm doing my basal body temperature, because she wants to get pregnant, she said, if I'm doing my basal body temperature, when should we try to have sex to have a baby? The problem is a lot of people will try to have sex when their temperature spikes. At that point, the egg is already released. The egg may be long gone. The most accurate way to know if you're trying to get pregnant as to when you should do it is your cervical fluid production. And so there's different variants of cervical fluid. You can have just kind of like wet, watery. That can happen after your menstrual cycle. Then there's creamy that you can it's kind of soft to the touch. That's kind of the beginning signs of having fertile fluid. The most fertile fluid, and the last day you'll have this is the day of your ovulation, is what's considered kind of like a sticky egg white cervical fluid. Don't be grossed out by this, guys. This is your body, and it's an amazing sign that your body is telling you that you can make life should you want it, but you also have the power and freedom to avoid getting pregnant in the presence of this. So again, the best way to understand the cervical fluid is that it's slippery, it's clear, and it's stretchy. You're thinking about egg white. The reason why is because sperm is able to travel very well in it, and it nourishes sperm as well. It is a fluid that will be there when it is time to get pregnant. So guess what? When you see this type of cervical fluid, or when you start seeing the production of cervical fluid happen within your body, when you're wiping like that, it's about time to get pregnant. So you can do barrier methods, or when you need to have sex. So I want you to understand this. The basal body temperature, if you're avoiding it, is to let you know, if you're avoiding to get pregnant, is to let you know, oh my gosh, am I having any red flags? Am I not producing enough progesterone? Do I have too much estrogen in your body? You can track it to see where your symptoms are. The next thing is that you can track your basal body temperature to know if you're having adequate days that you need to make sure you're producing enough progesterone. Now, your cervical fluid is going to be the most important sign of fertility because the fluid is there to get pregnant. And then there's different things, like if you're having fluid at different areas or cervical fluid at different areas in your cycle, it could be that you're producing too much estrogen or you're not producing enough progesterone. There's different things to look at, and there's different troubleshooting methods through there. So if you guys have any questions about your own cycle, about your own cervical fluid that you've been charting, you can send me a message here on doctorswarren.com. So cervical fluid, what you're looking for is slippery, clear, and again, if you feel good about it, you can check it yourself. The cervical fluid comes out on its own, so you can see it on your underwear, you can see it on the toilet paper. And then the final thing is your cervix positioning. And so as you become more and more fertile, your cervix is going to change, and you can easily just touch right in your vaginal canal. The cervix is that vaginal canal. And so the one thing you want to look at as your body is becoming more fertile is you want to see it become soft, high, and open. So you want to make sure, you really want to know, hey, is my body ready to get pregnant? You can check your cervix. So these 3 signs are not just tracking when you bleed, okay? That's not going to be accurate at all. It doesn't tell you when you ovulated. It doesn't tell you if you ovulated. It doesn't tell you if your body is ready to get pregnant. It doesn't tell you if the symptoms that you're feeling in regards to your health is related to estrogen or if it's related to progesterone. And so if you're going to use an app, you've got to do an app, and I mentioned the Glow app, the Clue app. You've got to use an app that is not only going to let you, track your basal body temperature, but see it on a chart. You also need an app that you can track your symptoms. If you're spotting, if you're, if you're having a heavy bleeding, if you're having headaches, if your breasts are tender, you have to be able to see a chart with those symptoms, because then you can understand what's going on with your body. So I'm going to go ahead and and I don't know if this person is on right now, but someone sent me their chart, and I can't really share it with you guys, but I'm going to explain what the chart looks like. So the chart is for someone who had a miscarriage, and these are 2 cycles, and they've been trying to get married. Not trying to get married, they've been trying to get pregnant for a while now. And so a few questions were, how does the body basal temperature tell me when I can have sex to have a baby? Another one is, what happens if temperature is all over the place? And about dry spotting. So let's go ahead and address all that. Let's talk about having your temperatures all over the place. So if you look at the chart and it's all really, really wonky, you have to make sure you eliminate some user error, which is, do you have a good thermometer? There are basal body temperature thermometers where they're going to be really, really accurate, okay? But you can get it like at Target or at Walmart. You want to make sure that you are testing it before moving around in bed. You want to make sure that you're testing your basal body temperature around the same time every single day. So that's going to be really, really important. And so you want to make sure you eliminate those user errors, that you're using a good thermometer, that you're doing it in the morning before you get out of bed, before you move, and that you're tracking it around the same time, that you're putting it in your mouth, tracking your temperature around the same time. Now, when you are charting, you're not really looking at those specific temperatures. What you want to see is the pattern. So the best way to explain that is that you're not worried about the trees, you're looking at the forest. So we're looking at the overall thing. So sometimes there'll be outliers. There's sometimes will be things that kind of stand out. So that's a really big thing. So for this cycle, there's a few things on this cycle that I will say. So if you're tuning in and you submitted your cycle, just message me on Facebook if you have any questions about this. There's a few things. Number one, when there is spotting before your period, that tends to point to there being a progesterone issue. And if you're charting, you can see that, because what you'll find is that your temperatures will stay pretty high up even leading up to the first day of your period. So you're not seeing that temperature come down. So when you see spotting right before your period, then we're looking at a possible progesterone insufficiency issue. There's not enough progesterone. So that could be a reason why you haven't been able to get pregnant yet. It's because you haven't had enough, you're not producing enough progesterone. Another reason could be because you are trying to have sex focused around just your basal body temperature. So if you're having sex, once it's spiked, the egg is probably gone. And it's possible to have sex twice a week for a year and miss your ovulatory day. It could be possible that you can have sex that often and not have enough progesterone to sustain that pregnancy, to allow the implantation to happen and to be well, implanted to start to grow a baby. So on this chart, a few things is this. So I wouldn't, if you're trying to get pregnant, you're not just paying attention to the basal body temperature. You want to see the cervical fluid consistency. So usually, if you're trying to get pregnant, you want to try before the spike. And so once you start doing this a couple of cycles, once you start charting it a couple of cycles, you'll get more used to and more in tune with your symptoms that you're feeling. Do I feel good? Do I see the cervical fluid? In fact, testosterone around day 10-ish will start rising to kind of get your sex drive up, because your body's like, time to get pregnant, but you don't have to. And so you start to see all of those things. So there could be a few different reasons, but on here, the few things I'm seeing is a possible progesterone insufficiency issue. And guys, if you're having cycle issues, if you're having low progesterone, a really great supplement is Vitex, which is Chase Treeberry. It is kind of known as the herb of all herbs when it comes to women's menstrual cycle and overall health. If you're having too much estrogen, I go between either a DIM supplement or stabilized sulforaphane like a Brocolite. It depends on what type of estrogen issue you have, or we just kind of go between those two. But Vitex and Chase Tree Berry is a really great supplement for helping to balance out the menstrual cycle. So on this cycle, I'm seeing that the progesterone temperatures aren't even that very high, plus the blood spotting. So if your temperatures on that second phase aren't very high and there's blood spotting, there's pointing to some progesterone issues. Another thing to be aware of is that if you're taking your temperature and it's on the low end, which I see a lot here, there's a lot of temperatures on this cycle that's in the 96 range. That points to a possible low thyroid issue, which can cause infertility. It can cause a lot of different problems. So that's another thing. I would say look at your thyroid, make sure that your thyroid levels are correct, not just TSH, but free T4, free T3, reverse T3, thyroid antibodies, and making sure those numbers are adequate. So a few things on here that I can look at is, number one, the temperatures are low. So I would do a full thyroid panel. Number two, there's spotting before the period. I would look at a few more cycles, or I would look at some previous cycles to see if those temperatures are on the low-high end, because again, that's going to be a progesterone issue. So I would look at increasing progesterone. And let's see another question here. Okay. And to pay attention not just to your basal body temperature, but looking at cervical fluid, basal body temperature, and cervix positioning. So just to kind of wrap it up for you guys, the biggest thing to understand is that according to the ACOG, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, in 2015, they said the importance of seeing a adolescent's menstrual cycle as a vital sign. But we're not teaching young girls how to understand their cycles. So then we're having women that don't understand their cycle. And with rising infertility, we have to understand what's going on inside of our bodies. Because a lot of people will run to stuff like Clomid that kind of pushes ovulation, which it also has a side effect to dry up cervical fluid. So yeah, Clomid can work for some women, but for a lot of women, yeah, it might cause ovulation to occur, but now you're losing cervical fluid, which does not make it, viable for sperm. So the biggest thing I would love for every woman to take away from this is that power doesn't come from a pill. Empowerment comes from knowing that the power is already inside of you, that you have all the abilities to be in control of your own body. And you can do that by not having to be dependent on a pill, but understanding that, hey, there are signs that you can, these signs that you can track to not only understand the symptoms that you might be feeling if there's a dysregulation within your body, but to also know that when you are ready to get pregnant, you can, and when you don't have to. And I will recommend, as you're starting to chart, to make sure that, you have a barrier method, like condoms, to make sure until you feel comfortable with it, that, okay, you have this backup method there. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you're watching this and you have any questions at all, make sure to leave a comment or to send me a Facebook message. We do consults, so if you're needing help with understanding your hormones better, you can go to drswarren.com. You can look at what it looks like to make a consult with me, and we can definitely help you guys out. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Have a great night.